Have you ever wondered what it takes to lead one of the world's leading investment firms?
The most important thing is to recognize that even when you're the CEO, it's not your view that needs to be the predominant view. It is a position being taken after hearing the collective views of everyone. Ultimately, buck stops with the CEO, right?
Dilhan Pillay Sandrasegara was appointed CEO of Temasek Holdings in October 2021, right when the world was bouncing back from the COVID-19 pandemic.
Singapore could reach an endemic COVID-19 state as early as the end of the year.
He had to deal with tough challenges from the onset.
Navigating a portfolio the size of Temasek's is actually a complex issue. If you build a portfolio, the question is it resilient? Is it resilient? Is it forward-looking? Is it able to withstand shocks in the marketplace?
In his first in-depth interview since taking office, Dilhan shares his leadership journey and unveils Temasek's inner workings, as well as his blueprint for the future.
Today, the question we have to ask ourselves is whether that model is still a winning model going forward. Temasek can never sit still because the world is moving. We can never ever think that we're there. So we're always evolving.
Initially, Dilhan saw his path to Temasek as a slight detour on his career map. Former CEO Ho Ching, otherwise known as HC, had spent 3 years trying to convince him to join Temasek before he finally agreed in 2010. He was the managing partner of one of Singapore's top law firms, specializing in corporate law, governance, and mergers and acquisitions. So why did he finally agree?
I thought I was temporarily giving up the law, okay, because I didn't intend to stay in Temasek for long, When I finally succumb to the move, but there's also an opportunity to give back to a country that's been so good to you. And I have benefited from not just a stable Singapore, but a Singapore that's just grown phenomenally through my childhood to my adulthood. So it's time to give back. And Temasek was a good place to consider giving back. I joined in 2010 September. Actually, I didn't have a day of rest, because I was supposed to join in January 2011. Ho Ching then said there's this crisis in Europe, the PIGS crisis, Portugal, Italy, Ireland, Greece, and Spain. So you have to come and, lots of things we have to do. So I agreed 18th October. And then she told me later on it's even becoming more acute, so 1st September. So I left 31st August and started 1st September. What a baptism of fire. I wouldn't say it was it was an easy passage, a steep learning curve. But if you're willing to learn new things, open your mind, accept that you may not know everything, rely on others who know more than you, even your subordinates, I think Temasek is an incredible learning journey.
A change at the top for Singapore's state investment firm, Temasek Holdings. CEO Ho Ching is retiring.
After leading Temasek for 18 years, HC passed on the leadership baton to Dilhan in 2021. This was not a big shock because Temasek had been open about succession planning for many years.
My first priority was actually succession. I did the same thing when I was in ST because I think you want to build an institution beyond yourself, and therefore you want to build a team from which you can grow the next generation leadership. So growing that leadership, growing that experience and the confidence to take decisions, filling out the team.
But the timing surprised some because it happened during the pandemic.
The pandemic doesn't derail our long-term plans. I'm actually very happy, very comforted that we have a team in Temasek led by Dilhan, who have spent the last couple of years thinking ahead what it means, what the future means. They have put together a plan, and so I think it is a good juncture to let the younger leadership lead the charge over the next decade.
Ho Ching is the entrepreneurial founding CEO of modern Temasek, if you can put it that way. For me, I've inherited a strong organization with a strong bench, and so my style has to be different. Even though I have the ability to sometimes push something, I should make sure that I calibrate my decisions, taking account of the views of others. And I would say that throughout my time at Temasek as part of her team, from September 2010 to October 2021, she consulted with all of us before making a decision. The decision is still hers, but she did consult. And that was a very important lesson for me. And I watched that and I thought, that's a good way of making sure your decisions are calibrated.
One of the key things that I try to do is to create space for the people to learn to take decisions, to have the confidence that they can take decisions and they will have a backing.
Under Dilhan's leadership, Temasek's mission and vision have mostly stayed the same, but it is constantly refined as circumstances and markets evolve. In its T2010 blueprint, Temasek wanted to go beyond Singapore with a focus in Asia and emerging economies. By T2020, Temasek was ready to widen its scope and invested more in developed markets like the United States and Europe. Today, as the architect of the T2030 blueprint, Dilhan has emphasized 4 key pillars: a resilient and forward-looking portfolio, sustainability at the core, a Temasek operating system that builds horizontal capabilities such as AI, blockchain, cybersecurity, data and digital, and sustainable solutions, organization, talent, and capabilities.
So today we have 2 engines which I say would propel us in the future if we do the right thing. One is, of course, our Temasek portfolio companies, and the second is our global portfolio. The skill sets required to oversee these 2 diverse groups of investments will have to be multifaceted going forward. Because I already have a very stable, somewhat mature portfolio. So it's different from, say, Ho Ching, who had a stable Singapore portfolio but built a growth portfolio. So for my job and my team's job is to effectively take what we have and position it for the next 10 to 15 years. We have to have some idea of what could be emerging so that we can be aware of the risks that might be there for our portfolio, and so that we can know how to shift our portfolio to be ready for those changes that are coming about. And most of that is technology-oriented.
Competition, political tensions, and the fluidity of the global economy are minefields in the investment landscape.
So I think, first of all, reputational risk has always been number 1 in our risk framework. Temasek chooses not to do things we feel that we can be impacted reputationally. And we've actually backed away from investments that could have given us a good return if we felt that the reputational risk associated with an investment would exceed our risk tolerance as an investor. The second point I'll make is that any investor, institutional or even individual, will never have a 100% batting average. There will be investments that give you a good return, and there will be investments that give you a negative return or are write-offs. That is inherent in the business of investing. You cannot move away from that factor. The question is whether you're able to still deliver long-term sustainable returns despite the negative returns on some investments that you make. So I think our batting average in terms of successful investments versus those which are not successful has been pretty good over our history.
Share prices in Singapore took a hit today.
Even with meticulous planning and diligence, missteps are inevitable. How did Temasek pivot amidst the global crisis?
So let's take, for example, Merrill Lynch and others. There was a time pre-GFC where the returns of financial services was very significant. So it wasn't wrong to invest in financial institutions. And if you remember, the GFC had a cascading effect. And obviously, when the market turned from the failure of Lehman to the next, which was Merrill Lynch, we got impacted. But on the other hand, we doubled down on our investments in Chinese banks at the same time because they had also reduced in value, but the businesses were stable and strong. And so while we actually didn't do so well on Merrill Lynch, we did well on the doubling down on the Chinese banks, the recapitalization of DBS, which was done with a rights issue at that time, and so on.
Temasek's long-term expected returns, as well as those from the Monetary Authority of Singapore, or MAS, and GIC, make up part of the NIRC, or Net Investment Returns contribution. The NIRC is a big component of the Singapore government's budget.
I believe Singaporeans today understand that the returns of GIC, Temasek MAS, is important for our government, it's important for their budget. I think that they would want Temasek GIC to continue to do well, and we have to hold ourselves accountable so that we are able to deliver because it's important. It's 1/5 of the government's operating budget, and that's based on the long-term real returns expected from all of us. So therefore, in the current environment, whatever we do has to aim towards that. Now, what's the challenge I face? So Temasek is a global investor. As a global investor, we have to maintain the DNA of Temasek, which is actually a DNA of Singapore. The thing is, we cannot have a Singapore-centric mindset in investing globally. We bring our Singapore values, our requirement for meritocracy, excellence, but we need to understand that we're operating in a global marketplace. And that means we have to understand the competition global marketplace and how it operates and how best we can succeed in a global marketplace.
Globally, Temasek employs about 1,000 people of more than 34 nationalities across 13 offices in 9 countries. Dilhan believes in giving his team international exposure. His time in the United States shaped his own understanding of global competition, helped him build valuable networks, and added to his management skills.
So I realized the big opportunity of going outside to run a regional office is that you build skills for yourself, small skills, but important skills, people skills, that you may not otherwise be able to pick up in a place like Temasek in Singapore. So you have a multifaceted way of running your business in a regional office. You have to decide the strategy for your market. You then oversee the investment process in terms of how you're sourcing for deals, meeting people to make sure you get the best deals. Your intelligence sources are different from what you have in Singapore because you're the feet on the ground in the market. And in the investment world, that information flow is very important. Someone wise told me, knowledge is good, know-how is better, know who is best. Every action and effort we undertake, whether big or small, counts towards significant impact. But I believe even more so that when we gather, like we are doing today, and partner with others of the coalition of the willing, our individual efforts can have a multiplier effect to shape the future we want for ourselves and our future generations. If your mandate is to build a long-term sustainable portfolio, you have to think about sustainability and climate change. If your mandate is only invest the next 1 or 2 years, you may be able to kick the can down the road until the next one. It comes to a time when 1 to 2 years means you have to think about climate change. We can't because we have this portfolio, and the duration of capital is not limited. So I would say today it's recognized as an important thing within Temasek.
With a mandate to deliver sustainable returns over the long term, Temasek views sustainability as essential for growth. Its investment decisions focus on long-term environmental, social, and economic sustainability, not just profit. Temasek also partners with funds and companies to invest directly in this sector for a bigger impact. One example is being an anchor investor in the Brookfield Global Transition Fund, managed by Brookfield Asset Management, a global alternative company with over $600 billion worth of assets.
Sustainability is not a prerogative for future generations, it's the imperative now. We've invested together in renewables, in batteries, in carbon capture, in hydrogen, biofuels, waste recycling, and beyond. I think the thing that is most compelling about this relationship is a willingness to go to the heart of the problems, and that means together we're going to where the emissions are in the world. This partnership we expect to continue and intensify as we move forward, combining our respective operating expertise and our willingness to make a difference across the world.
Another joint venture is with BlackRock, the world's biggest asset manager. The partnership has raised $1.4 billion for its first and one of the largest venture capital funds. It will focus on areas like carbon capture, bio and low-carbon products, next-generation energy, and advanced mobility.
It is our vision and how we as long-term multi-generational investors can invest in these nascent technologies, and our hope that some of these nascent companies that we're investing in become the next generational unicorns. I believe we have the right team. This is a combination of our teams, and it's very exciting.
Temasek does not just invest in big companies and funds, it also believes in nurturing startups as key to the future.
Researchers and deep tech startups can tap on fresh funding and mentorship.
In April, it teamed up with Bill Gates' climate organization, Breakthrough Energy, to create a program in Singapore to help innovators in Southeast Asia develop and market new climate-friendly technologies.
Now, the 3-year joint funding commitment will support tech developments that can reduce greenhouse gases in Southeast Asia.
Well, the scale of what we need to do is very daunting. Asia is where the majority of these emissions are taking place. Understandably, that's where the majority of the people on the planet live. And a lot of those countries are, like India, are getting into the phase where they build a lot of roads and structures. And that, if we use present techniques, emissions could actually go up. And so to have Temasek looking at this with the relationships it has throughout Asia and its understanding of both the political side, the private sector side, they're kind of an ideal partner for Breakthrough. The reason I get to be more optimistic about this than most observers is I get to see at the lab how many brilliant ideas there are. And I see partners like Temasek working with us to say, okay, how do we get that up and going? But yes, it's a question of when, not if, we can get the world to net zero.
I believe that we're considered to be amongst the leaders of our peer group in terms of our initiatives in this area. And I think it's not just about the investments we've made, which are quite long-term in orientation, whether it's related to climate tech, sustainable financing, or even in investing in areas which are climate-aligned or climate-aligned opportunities in the sectors that we invest in. I think it's because of the fact that we have been able to get into thought leadership on this. We have been able to participate in the public advocacy for this, and we are doing it in a reasonable way. We're not expecting things to happen overnight because we are believers in a just transition, not just transition. And that comes with different things in it. And I think because of that, we do have a certain level of credibility as we go out there into the marketplace. Now, every CEO of Temasek has had to deal with changes. Okay, so it's not like my job is unusual from what Ho Ching had to look at, unusual from what Greg Pohat had to look at, and so on. Change is a constant, and because of that, we must be comfortable with ambiguity and embrace it with tenacity and purpose. This has driven us since our founding in 1974 to not be satisfied with the status quo and constantly evolve. And if we were to ask ourselves, why are we driven by courage, conviction, and commitment? Not just in terms of investing, but as an institution, as a steward, with the community always in mind. We do this so that every generation prospers.